So hi, welcome to Anchor Reviews, an episode after the credits on Anchor Reviews. This is Tyler from Anchor Reviews, and before we get into our review here, we got a special guest star with us. I want to introduce yourself.
Hello, Tyler. My name is Optimus Prime.
That is awesome, man. We have Optimus Prime here. It's unbelievable. It's just really quick and spontaneous and that. I know your time is very precious right now, but I just got quick questions for you. I mean, one of them is that with Amazon and all, shipping their products and that, because they have the Prime on there, do you get residuals from them using your name?
It's funny you mention that. My legal counsel has recently alerted me to this situation, and the answer, to put it in short terms, is not currently. But while I am fighting the Decepticons, my lawyers are fighting for me, for my legal representation.
All right, good to know. And one last question here. I remember 5 years ago when we were talking about the Bumblebee movie, you had a statement about Haley Steinfeld. Do you still stand by your statement that she is thick?
I do. Haley Steinfeld, I must say. And in case any Autobots or Haley is hearing this right now, damn shorty you thick.
All right, very good, very good. And I got another guest star, of course, to introduce himself.
Oh, excuse me, out of the way here, yes.
Hey, sorry about that, guys. Was running late, so I had Optimus cover for me. Much appreciated. Thanks for standing in for me, Optimus.
Happy to help.
And this is a review on Transformers Rise of the Beast. Now, it's been a while since we had a Transformers movie. The last time was Bumblebee. And I think that movie didn't do that good financially at first, and that could have spelled the end of the franchise, but it got enough good word of mouth where Paramount felt comfortable in continuing the franchise. And we have this new one called Transformers Rise of the Beast. It takes place in the 1990s in the same continuity as Bumblebee, where we have the Autobots going up against the Terracons, not the Decepticons necessarily, and they're after this key that can either make the Autobots go back to their home world or what are they called again? The
Maximals.
The Maximals go back to their home world. Meanwhile, the Unicron and his goons are trying to use it for their own nefarious purposes. So, what did you think of Transformers Rise of the Beast, Steven?
Well, I've definitely got a lot to say about this film, because as anyone who knows me, even by vibe alone, they know that I am a huge Transformers geek. And so to put it bluntly, I really liked the film. I definitely think this was definitely one of the stronger ones, including of the Bay former films, which people know that I'm a big fan of. So there's a lot to talk about. I really liked, I don't know exactly where we want to start, but you mentioned there weren't really Decepticons in this film, but that was kind of, for people that knew about the films, it was clear that the Terracons were going to be the main focus, and for those that don't know, those are the servants of a certain dark god that eats planets, known as Unicron. And if you've seen the trailers, that's not exactly a spoiler. But, so it was basically the Terracons, the Maximals, which in Beast Wars were the equivalent to the Autobots that turn into animals, mammals, and some birds. And then the Autobots. And we can go from there. What did you think of the movie, Tyler?
I enjoyed it. I would say it's got to be the part of the majority of the better Transformer movies. I was just thinking about it days ago about what are my favorite and least favorite Transformer movies. And I would say the first one and Bumblebee are some of the better ones, I would say. I do think that the worst Transformer movie ever, for me personally, is Age of Extinction, because I think it's way too long. The pacing isn't very good. A lot of people, talk about the whole the age of consent thing between Marky Mark's character's daughter and this other guy. But I think what was far more egregious and I took far more issue with is that this movie, the whole third act is just basically Hollywood kissing up to China in that way. It really started this whole bad trend that was going on of let's pander to the Chinese market. Now they're making their own kind of movies. They don't really need our money our movies anymore necessarily. So that hasn't really worked out in the long run for us. So that makes that movie, I would say, not very good, dated, and in my opinion, the worst of the Transformer movies that I've seen. However, with Rise of the Beast, this new one, it's one of the better Transformer movies that I thought was pretty enjoyable in parts, but we'll get into more details about it. One of my favorite aspects, of course, was the villain Scourge, voiced by Peter Dinklage. I really liked how this villain was. I kind of got like General Grievous vibes from it, where he's like, collecting things from his victims. And when he took his mask off later in the movie, I got like a Phantom of the Opera vibe from it in a way, how disfigured his face was. But speaking of like Star Wars and that, there's a few shots in the movie where there's like these gradual like zoom in, zoom ins, like a camera push in for like a visual effect shot, and that looked like something out of like the George Lucas prequel movies.
I get you. Yeah, I will say regarding the villain Scourge, I liked him in the first 2/3. Like I will say probably first hour and a half, I thought he was pretty strong and pretty decent. But I definitely felt by the end that he and the Terrorcons as a whole kind of just got nerfed for story's sake, which left me feeling very similar to, from a different franchise, Ultron in Age of Ultron. Mm-hmm. It kind of felt like he's just weak now because the story says he has to be.
Yeah.
And that didn't feel great compared to even some of the weaker Bayformer films. It generally feels like even if the villains weren't that memorable, they had some fight in them. And it really felt like that it was basically just curtains preemptively. And I will say that upon reanalyzing it a bit, that I would almost say that where some of the Transformer films drag on a bit too long, this one felt too brief to me. And maybe that's just a trend has been set where I expect longer. But in talking about it a little bit with some friends that I'm involved with in the Transformers community, there does seem to be this consensus of while there's some degree in the Bayformer films and even Bumblebee of like world building and stuff being left open for later on, this was very just what you see is what you get. We're going to spoon feed you everything and present it. And while I think that's good for introducing audiences to new stuff like in Transformers 1, I do think it did, as like an avid fan, it just barely notched it down a bit for me, because it did feel like there's not as much to read into. But again, that's also kind of a pretentious critique, because I don't know, that would be like, I don't know, like someone that's not into the DC movies, like complaining that there wasn't enough vague metaphors in Zack Snyder's, cut of Justice League or something. So, while it's not a very substantive critique, I do think that there's something to... They gave the casual fans a bit more in this one, which is good if you're wanting to start out something new. But I would have liked to see a little more, and paying as much attention as I did to the behind-the-scenes production of this film, I know for a fact that there was a whole Decepticon named Transit that was cut from this version of the film, and the director has said that in the DVD or Blu-ray or digital release, whenever they do it, there is going to be at least an additional scene with him fighting Optimus, as well as a couple other scenes. So I'm very curious to see what didn't make it to the theatrical cut and see if that changes the pacing issues. But what did you think?
Yeah, I mean, with this one, I can see the issue where some people thought that maybe it was a little too brief at times. But the thing is, I think what stood out to me more as well, that I was enjoying it too, were some of the other additional voice actors of the other, characters that we have. Ron Perlman, the voice of Optimus Primal. For me, I know Ron Perlman best in his voice acting work, mainly voicing Clayface from Batman the Animated Series. We also have Michelle Yeoh as Erazor.
Eraser.
Yeah. And I remember her best from being in The Mummy, Tomb of the Dragon Emperor, aka the worst of the Brendan Fraser Mummy movies. And it's nice that she won her Oscar recently. But sadly, the one I was kind of iffy about, who mildly won me over, but I was still on the fence on it, by the end of it, was Pete Davidson as Mirage.
Oh, yeah.
Where, for me, what kind of puzzles me about Pete Davidson is, like, I don't think he's really as funny as people make him out to be. Like, I mean, there's some moments in the movie where it's like, okay, it was kind of mildly funny here and there, but I think the fact that this guy has gone on dates with so many attractive women this guy is living proof that selling your soul to the devil is real. This guy proves that 100%. I mean, just look at this guy. He looks like a ghoul from Scooby-Doo. Okay?
No, I hear you. I will agree that, like, he was not as bad as I was expecting he would be, but he wasn't amazing either. I will say by the end he kind of won me over a bit, but the whole Autobot faction as a whole in this movie, one of the problems, and I don't want to spoil, but there was the teasing of risk and stake that a lot of the other Transformers movies had. And by the end of this movie, it was like, yeah, but not really, though. And that's something that is very in common with, like, other comic book movies that, to me, always, marks it down a peg. But I will say that, absolutely, Ron Perlman as Optimus Primal, Air Razor,
Michelle Yeoh.
Peter Cullen, hats off to you, oh Captain, my Captain. You're
Yeah.
always amazing. But I will say that, I would have liked to see a little bit more maximal screen time, because I think they did largely steal the show, along with, a lot of time for Pete Davidson, which was okay, but I don't know, it was kind of, it feels like they're trying to turn him into the next Bumblebee, and I'm not completely sold on it yet. I guess time will tell, but for this one it was a decent introduction, at least, and I'm very curious to see where they go with the Unicron trilogy, as it's being called, if this succeeds, because I know that's what Stephen Cable Jr. is pushing for, and that will be very interesting. I'm sure we'll get into spoiler territory at some point, especially regarding the ending, because boy, do I have things to say about that. But
Yep.
I do want to mention just real quick, I guess the only other problem, that as someone that knows Optimus Prime personally, I'm the reason he got on the show here. But I will say that regarding the relationship to the human protagonist of this film, being Noah, the
Noah Diaz.
Yeah, Noah Diaz, the Hispanic, down on his luck guy back from the war looking for a job. I think that where I see they were going with Optimus Prime's arc, basically struggling to find himself as a leader, seeing it in the form of a human was a little pretentious. And I strongly disagree with that. I think that seeing it in Optimus Primal was good, because that effectively showed an example that was someone that took honor historically from Optimus Prime's example, and seeing a young Optimus Prime, he may have been let down a little bit, but to put it on a human who's in his maybe 20s compared to someone that's 6 million years old, I just, to me, it was one of those moments where I felt like in the franchise, we just have to throw human stuff in there to make humans seem more important than they are. And this to me was a more egregious example of it. But all in all, like, that's not to say I didn't like his character. That was just a script writing decision that I disagree with. And so, with all that being said, I've kind of yattered on, but what were your feelings, especially on him and the is it the female protagonist?
Okay. Well, the thing is, we have Noah Diaz, played by Anthony Ramos, and I recognize him from this bad Liam Neeson movie called Honest Thief. It was the one where Jai Courtney was a villain, and that movie has one of the worst explosion effects I've seen in recent years. But anyway, I think he was fine in the movie. I think the problem is that we see like, oh, I struggle with, group skills or whatever. But the problem is that we don't really see an example of how he's not really a team player necessarily. Like he's kind of a loner, especially the fact that he does, he does care for his brothers. So that kind of, I would say, kind of contradicted that.
Mm-hmm.
I think what was worse was Dominique Fishback as Elaine Wallace. I think she was miscast as someone who was supposed to be, highly intelligent with architecture, with archaeological stuff and that. I mean, it wasn't as bad as like Aquafina as a police officer in that Renfield movie for me. Especially, she did not act or sound like a cop whatsoever with her body language, how she moved.
Mm-hmm.
I was not convinced whatsoever. It looked like an SNL skit. With Lena Wallace, I mean, it was kind of better in that. But for me, I just felt like the casting could have been better on that regard. I mean, her acting wasn't bad. It was just, kind of miscast in a way.
Kind of wooden, maybe a little bit.
Yeah, I could see why. Yeah, I think we should get into spoilers real quick. But just before that, I just want to say that I just hope whenever we finally see the day when we make a Transformers movie or like see a Transformers movie that we don't where there's no humans. It's just Autobots, Decepticons, or whatever. It's just all that. But yeah, we'll get into spoiler territory. So
I agree. By the way, just real quick.
Yes.
Absolutely.
So with the all right, we'll just fast forward this part if you don't want to be spoiled. But the climax of the movie I found really enjoyable, especially the moment where Bumblebee comes back and the song choice was perfect when he like pretty much jumps out of that aircraft.
Mm-hmm.
The song by LL Cool J, I don't know what it's called, but it's his most popular one.
I think it was "Don't Call It a Comeback" or something like that.
Yeah, Mama Said Knock You Out.
Yeah, no, I definitely, I feel strangely about the final act because up until that point, I think that overall the villains felt good, but I still feel that, like, especially by the very ending, they got nerfed, and it was kind of just to an egregious extent. Like, one thing, while we're in spoiler territory, I don't think many people have caught on to this, and so if you're hearing this for the first time, you're in the know of Transformers nerddom right now. I want you to know that. But we're in spoiler talk, so I'm gonna drop the big bomb right now. Lots of people don't seem to understand who Scourge was supposed to be. And I think that that's because at the last minute they decided to cut back because Lorenzo de Bonaventura, who produced all the other Transformers movies, was not as sold on the idea. But for people who are weirdos like me that really obsess about these movies and stuff, we understand and see what Stephen Cable Jr. has been pushing, and even little hints from Twitter. And it's very clear if you look at especially Transformers 4 or 5, and we're talking about the Bayformer movies now, if you look at Optimus Prime in his night look, and then you look at Scourge with his mask off, it's clear that at some point this was supposed to be that Optimus turned evil. And it's largely, if you look at the neck, it's very subtle details, and there are issues about it, like the Bayformer Transformers are bigger, but this movie also clearly played around with mass shifting, where Mirage turned into a garbage truck. Like, come on. So they're kind of breaking the rules there. But it was left in a very gray area, but I do think, as someone that was paying as much attention to this as I was and other Transformers fans were, Whether or not that's ultimately what they decided, it's clear at some point the design was supposed to at least implicate, could this have been that Optimus Prime? And I think that also matches the tone for this movie, because Optimus Prime and Optimus Primal were very important figures. So to have the villain be some version of a Prime from the future was an interesting decision. I don't love it for its implication, because I don't think that the Bayformers should just be thrown out. They do have a lot to offer, but I do. It's clear that there's some element of that was at play, and my more serious complaint about it is just the little backup that they had. They were called Freezors, that were kind of backing them up, and Scorponok that Unicron was sending down to help. They just didn't feel like a big enough threat. Like we were supposed to feel that they were, but they just got plowed through. And obviously, any movie's going to have some element of like expendable cannon fodder, but I do think that basically some of the Maximals that we didn't get to see enough from, Cheetor and Rhinox, and some of the other Autobots, we didn't even talk about Pablo or Wheeljack. He, to me, I had a bad feeling even from seeing the trailers, and he was definitely the weakest in the whole film. Like, I just did not like that character at all. That depiction of Wheeljack I reject full-heartedly. But the basic gist of it is, I think that they did a really good job up until that final battle, and the final battle was fine, but it ended up feeling a little weak as a Transformers fan compared to the other final battles. So, and then also the post-credit stuff, where all the Transformers fans were like, okay, so you're going to bring Megatron in, right? And even if it's not like, okay, so you're not fully sold on, is this a reboot or not? Like, come on, just decide already. You could still put in the Predacon Megatron, which is a giant T-Rex, which was the main villain against Optimus Primal. So you could at least tie him in or something. No, we're going to tie in, of all things, G.I. Joe. And Tyler was with me. I just face-palmed when that happened. I was like, oh no. Like, they're clearly trying to prop up G.I. Joe off of Transformers. And I think that's a big mistake. Especially if you read the comics, the Transformers become the expendable ones in that situation. And that's exactly backwards for how this franchise should work. But I've yapped on for a bit. Let me give Tyler a turn here.
I felt like the climax was enjoyable, entertaining in that. And yeah, I mean, I felt like sometimes the backgrounds had like too many gray in them, even though the details and the effects were pretty good. And even with the whole G.I. Joe twist, kind of thinking about it, kind of made sense, because the kind of outfit that the Noah character goes into reminded me of those high-tech suits from like G.I. Joe: The Rise of Cobra during that Paris chase scene. So it was, I mean, okay, that does kind of make sense, a little bit of hint to it, but I mean, I will admit that was an interesting surprise that I saw. But personally, I feel like G.I. Joe is one of those franchises where it should just kind of die in a way, because it's proven to keep failing harder and harder the more movies they've tried with it, especially that Snake Eyes movie, which was meant to reboot the franchise. That failed very hard. I mean, and personally, I thought that Rise of Cobra was fairly fine. It has moments, and a lot of that is because Steven Sommers was a director on that movie. He co-wrote, co-produced it. He directed and wrote some of my favorite movies like The Mummy and Van Helsing. That, you know, part of that. But I can tell with watching that movie, I can feel like some producer at Paramount was like, be more like Michael Bay, be more like Michael Bay, like every day of filming. It felt like just copy that. And that came out like a month after Revenge of the Fallen came out. But yeah, the thing is, I thought the twist was I mean, I'm kind of conflicted about the twist. Okay, like, I didn't really see it coming, but on the other hand, I'm like, I don't know about this. how we're just gonna prop up this iffy franchise to this successful one.
Mhm.
But we'll see what happens with it. And I know there's like another one coming out next year.
Oh, are you talking about Transformers One? It's going to be called.
Yeah.
That one I think is animated exclusively and will be a prequel on Cybertron, so it's more what you're asking for.
Good.
And I, in general, would be fully on board. But some of the voice cast, I don't know if you've seen. I think,
Chris Hemsworth, Scarlett Johansson.
yeah, big questions on those for me. To me, that if you're going to do it right, you got to have like the actual voice actors. So Peter Cullen again as Optimus. Wally's here. Come on, he's old. Use him while you got him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Frank Welker as Megatron. You got to bring those in, and so I'm hoping for the best for that, but we will see. But being talking about Rise of the Beast, I will definitely say that I was pleased with this one, especially to me compared to Bumblebee. Like, I just wanted it to be more than Bumblebee, because to me Bumblebee failed even compared to some of the better Bayformers in a couple areas that I think I talked about, but I'd be happy to talk again about maybe during Transformers 1. But I definitely was pleased with this, and I'm sure we'll, kind of talk about our final gradings here.
Okay, so what would you give this movie, Steven?
Well, I've been thinking about it way too heavily. As a Transformers nerd, someone would probably decide in 5 seconds, but I've been weighing it heavily, and I think that there was way more good than bad. Overall, the things that were there were mostly nitpicks or things about the ending, which, albeit is important, but what it was setting out to do, which seemed to be please both G1 and Bayformer fans, which is no small task. That's like trying to please Israel and Palestine at the same time. So good job on that. You really did it, Steve. And I definitely, the main human issues, as in with the dynamics between too much human versus too much Transformer, I think they did a better job at balancing it this time compared to most of the other movies. And really, my only complaints were towards the final act and tying G.I. Joe in. So with that all being considered, I definitely have to give this movie a positive grade, definite thumbs up, go and see it. But if I were to give it a specific grade, I think it would be somewhere between an 89 and a 92%. I'm leaning more towards 92. So definitely an A. And please go see it. Go support this movie, because we need more good Transformers movies from passionate filmmakers that love it. And for that matter, I mean, just in general, these franchises that are just constantly being rebooted and stuff, get them in capable hands. Get them, get people who are passionate as writers, as film directors, as concept artists. Get those people in the craft, and that is what movies like this are teaching us. So, what did you think, though, Tyler?
Yeah. Well, personally, I enjoyed this movie. It's a movie where I'm like, it's enjoyable. I mean, there's some bumpy stuff with it, mainly the whole line of like, oh, when you go to your job interview, make them laugh. White people love that sort of thing. I'm like, okay, he's up on the anti-whiteism and that sort of thing. But the thing is, I enjoyed what this movie was trying to do with trying to be entertaining for the most part. And I think the visual effects were very well made, especially the detail. Especially if you look at Optimus's like windshield, you can see like the reflection on it, which is really close attention to detail with that. The human characters were fine, I guess. I just felt like there were some things that could have been better with a rewrite. And I felt like the villain was really good and very imposing, especially like even his boss in a way. And also the movie's climax, I felt like it was enjoyable. I just felt like maybe they should have shifted to another kind of location, like, 3-act story structure, because we have New York City, Peru, but then we're still in Peru for the third act. I'm not saying they have to constantly keep doing that. It just felt like a little bit odd to me. The G.I. Joe twist at the end, I'm kind of mixed about. But overall, I enjoyed Transformers Rise of the Beasts. Again, I've said this many times before, but one of the better Transformer movies. So as of right now, I would give this movie about 3 stars out of 4. So anyway, I remember talking about the other movies in the franchise and that. And it's kind of weird looking back on how when we saw that first Transformers movie, how we would never guess that many years later that Shia LaBeouf would be converted to Catholicism, and then Megan Fox would be doing some kind of weird bloodletting stuff with Machine Gun Kelly.
Yeah, I often, especially with Machine Gun Kelly, think of from Toy Story, I'm Mrs. Nesbit, with him in the dress, Machine Gun Kelly, because that's how Buzz was too. But no, it is interesting to see how their real life character arcs have kind of spiraled in completely different directions. And
oh yeah,
they are. I don't know if you can contribute it all to Transformers, but certainly the Transformers franchise has done its work on them. So.
Yeah, I mean, especially on Megan Fox's work. I mean, have you seen that Lion movie, bro?
Oh, no! You gotta put the poster in there, because it literally looks like classes in Photoshop that I took back in high school. They'd be like, do better than this. And that's the poster for the movie. Did a child make this?
It's like a banner. Especially the lion is what the dead giveaway is.
Yeah, it's incredible just how unrealistic it looks. But no, it's incredible. And you said she's going to be in an Expendables movie.
Yeah, the 4th one.
Talk about reaching the bottom of the barrel on that one. Like, man, I mean, not to say that she can't be in like an action movie, but to act like she's some action star because she's been in Transformers and a movie about a lion, like
a movie about a lion.
I don't know, man. I don't know. So
yeah. So anyway, this is Tyler from Man Credit Reviews
and Optimus Prime from Cybertron,
and Stephen Lawson from Stephen Lawson, the YouTube channel.
All right, and we hope you enjoyed this episode after the credits on Anchor Reviews, and we hope to make a lot more in the future. Please like and subscribe.
Roll out. Autobots, transform and roll out to the theaters.
But unfortunately, you're going to have to endure the Nicole Kidman advertisement.
Oh, no.